Well, thanks for having us down here at VKLA, Alex.
Thank you for inviting yourself down here, Greg.
I'll come down here every single day if you let me.
No, really, it's like it's Disneyland for engineers and producers and musicians. It's a definitely Candyland.
Yeah. Well, like you said in the interview with Lisamarie, we actually chatted on the phone. I was calling you when I was trying to design my Neve console, this custom desk, and I needed the CAD drawings and
For the Raven.
yeah, for the Raven.
I know that was like a heart melting moment for me, because I'm like, here's an engineer I respect building a studio for a musician I have worshipped, and you're plopping the product that I created in the middle of a Neve console. That I did everything I could to get you what you needed. Did I give you what you needed?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, what's interesting is Steve Vai's studio is actually next door to the studio where I put that. And so that was for my personal setup. But there's a magic little pathway that connects the yards, so I can go from his studio to mine.
Right.
And so his studio has this amazing tree audio console, and I designed the desk based on all the curvature of that console.
Oh, wow.
So I wanted consistency. And the same guy, Scotty Bednar, who built Steve Vai's studio, built this studio, and he also built the custom desk. And we just had these ideas of like, what are we going to do? You know, had this idea of doing this modular mastering style desk. And then just magically within days of this idea coming to fruition in our minds, that Raven, the small version, the MTI, was announced. And I was like, wow, it was like 2 months away from, being announced. And I found a way to get a hold of somebody, and it was you.
Yeah.
It's like, I need the CAD drawings because I got a guy building this desk and I need the exact dimensions. So it worked out. It was exciting, because I always wanted to mix in front of the speakers. I was so tired of the whole Pro Tools rig off to the side where you're, either your left or your right ear is getting the main, feed of the speakers, and it's not old school. That idea was let you to marry analog to digital perfectly, right?
Couldn't be said better.
Well, and now we fast forward, and there's a new version that's actually better and less expensive than the original one.
It's amazing. It's what we wanted from the beginning, because this is the Raven, when it first came out, was like $2,500, and it had infrared technology, which is super fast. But this is exactly the same thing as an iPhone, and so super fast.
Yeah, that is much smoother.
Yeah, it's what people expect. It's the same experience that a billion people have now with the iPhone in their pocket, and now you can touch your DAW directly with it.
Wow, I'm gonna have to figure out how to get one of these.
I don't think it'll be too hard. Except it has been hard because they've been so popular. Honestly, they've been hard to get.
Yeah.
We can't stock enough of them. Slate can't build enough of them. And then this may date this video, but a couple of months ago, there was actually an earthquake at the factory in Taiwan? I'm trying to remember where it is. At a factory in Asia where this particular touchscreen is made. And so all these people all over the world can't get a Raven right now because the earthquake affected the production at the factory, and it's going to be a few months before they're out again.
Wow. I mean, that's not a bad problem to have, though. You got a lot of orders.
Yeah.
That's cool. I remember when I got mine, it was like I had to go through and make sure that I could reserve one, because I was like, I needed one right away. Like I didn't want to wait, and I think it was like in October, or I can't remember what time they actually came out, but I was like, I got to be on that list to get one of the first run.
Well, what was so cool about that is that, you were one of the people who could see the vision right from the beginning, and you were an early adopter. It's hard being an early adopter because you're going on faith,
I have to be honest, because I was at AES in New York, or in San Francisco.
Right.
It might have been the first year that Steven announced the big version.
Right, that's when that prototype
and
was
to
there.
me, I kind of was like, I don't see how that's, I don't know. I was I was not,
there were a lot of
so
skeptics.
Much, I just didn't get
alone.
it. I was like, whatever. And then when that one came out, I was like, that makes sense, because I feel like the big one, it's like you're taking a big leap in adopting that. And that makes sense if you get that and you're totally cool with that. But the smaller one, it's like you can still integrate analog gear and have this setup. And for me, I had this idea of this perfect hybrid setup. And that's kind of like where we are today, is like hybrid mixing. And everybody's trying to figure out how to have a modular setup and that you can always change and upgrade as you go. You know, you're not stuck with some huge console that you don't like.
Totally. I mean, that's the amazing thing about this, and one of the things that helped us convince ourselves that it was worth doing, because, you know, you buy a physical controller, maybe it integrates well with your DAW, but those knobs and those switches will always just be what they are, you know.
Yeah.
But the Raven is, because it's software, it's infinitely adaptable. And, you know, the MTX that you mentioned, the very first prototype, kind of showed us what was possible. And I consider that kind of like the Formula One car of the Raven, because, you know, you sometimes, you know, Ford or GM, they have to make the Formula One thing to prove the technology, and then it gets, you know, distilled down into the product that everybody can buy and everybody can afford. And the MTX actually has been greatly improved since then as well. And now, you know, if you had an SSL console or a larger console and you want that footprint, or you want that client wow factor, you know, you want your clients to feel like they walked onto the set of Star Trek, you know, there's nothing like a 46-inch touchscreen, or 3 of them like Will.i.am has, to draw people in. But I love that for $1,000, you know, everybody now can have the power of this intuitive interface, and it's so flexible, and you can stick it right next to your compressors.
Well, and you say $1,000, it's like I can go down the Apple store and I'll spend $1,000 on their cinema display, right? $9.99.
Yeah.
So why not get one of these, even if you're not even using the touch technology all the time?
I had no intention of filming a Slate infomercial just now, but I think we just did. That was like, we just gave the value proposition for the Raven.
I just, you know, I think when there's products that are worth talking about, you know, like people like you and Steven, you guys are like innovators of like technology. You guys are trying to make products that are great.
Yeah.
And it's proven. I mean, he collaborates with Paul Wolf.
Yeah.
And people that are just known for making great equipment. You know, you're not trying to like pull one over on somebody, you know.
And Justin Ulysses Morse was the, you know, he's a known analog designer as well, and he designed the first analog electronics in the Raven MTX. So he deserves a shout out and credits for that too.
Cool. Right on. Well, is there anything else you want to chat about in this
we are in Candyland.
This is like, you know, my daughter, your kids, what do they want to do? They want to go to Disneyland or, you know, Universal Studios, something like that. I want to go here and play with all these knobs and check out all these meters.
Vintage King really took a risk putting all this super expensive gear in one place, and, you know, we have a lot of partnerships with manufacturers and stuff to make this possible, to you know, have stuff that's all plugged in, ready to go. The idea here is, you know, you and I have done a lot of sessions in a lot of studios. We've used probably all the best vintage tube mics and different kinds of consoles, but not everybody has had access to that stuff. And that's what a place like Vintage King lets people do. Is I love doing demo sessions here with people and watch their eyes light up when they hear the difference between like a U87 and a Manley Reference cardioid, and they can come down in here and, okay, now I picked my mic. Now I'm going to pick the preamp that it goes through, and they hear how radical the changes. And I mean, it's all music, right? I mean, as engineers, you know what a different feeling it is going through, say, a Manley tube preamp compared to a BAE solid state with a big transformer.
Well, it's like, you know, going to Guitar Center, you're trying out amps and guitars, you know. Now finally there's a place like that for pro audio gear for geeks like us that want to tweak, and you know, and that's kind of partly why I do this channel too, is I try and help people learn how to, you know, compare equipment and understand what it does. And not everybody can come to, you know, the showroom in Nashville or LA. So, you know, it's kind of cool to interact with people all over the world. And, you know, because sometimes people ask me like, what do you think of this or that? And I was like, well, I write it down, and I plan on doing videos and just doing comparisons so people can hear. Because it's not as important about what I think about it. It's what they think based on what they're hearing.
That's this gear is so personal. I mean, I think speakers and microphones are the most personal, you know, equipment choice, because oftentimes, you know, speakers are matched to your ears, microphones matched to your voice, and gear, you know, it's all about preference. And so, yeah, I mean, I love what you're doing, because it helps people make a really educated choice, and not, you know, buying a $1,000 or several $1,000 preamp or some piece of outboard gear. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, so many people are like making bad choices, you know, just because they don't have the opportunity to test it out, or they don't have somebody giving them good advice. And it's great that you guys let people come in and twist the knobs and just play around, because you want to make a good purchase, and you don't want to you don't want to be stuck with something that you got to sell and then buy something else.
Right.
I mean, you consult for a living. It's like I do that sometimes, and it's like I have fun showing people that you can actually spend less money on things and get a better result. Sometimes people think they need this all this stuff, and it's like, sometimes less gear is better, or the right choice of gear.
The right choice, exactly. Yeah. Well, a shout out to the owners of Vintage King, Mike and Andy Nera, and Jeff Ehrenberg for creating the idea of Vintage King Los Angeles, because it took a lot of energy to create this situation. And we want to, for the people who don't have an opportunity, or for the people who do have an opportunity to come down and hear something firsthand, then they walk out here feeling totally confident about their decision. And if for some reason when they get to their room, it's a little plug for Vintage King, and for some reason it doesn't work for them, they still have 30 days to bring it back. So, it's kind of the best of both worlds.
It's cool, yeah. It's a natural progression, because I remember, dealing with Jeff back when they were in Alhambra down there, and we would be getting gear and stuff like that, and we'd be able to test it out. But it's cool that you can come just try it, Because sometimes if you want to buy a lot of stuff, say somebody wants to outfit their whole studio, I need speakers, I need a console, I need mic pre's, or certain things, it's like you can kind of configure all that here and hear it.
Okay, so Greg, what do you think is one of the biggest knowledge gaps that's out there? You talk to a lot of people, and certainly your interview series and your YouTube channel is sparking a lot of conversation. So, I mean, what advice would you give to somebody who, since we're in the world of equipment here, and we're talking about equipment, what's like some basic stuff I just need to have to be able to make a good recording, and then also, be able to build off of that, not have to replace it again in a year or something?
Well, I guess if it depends on what kind of music you're doing. So if you need microphones to record an amp or vocal, start with some decent microphone.
How do I know what a decent mic is?
It's hard. I mean, if you can't go to a place like this, you just got to do a lot of research. I mean, if you can get a hold of a mail order thing where you can try before you buy, or just, try and just research and find, as much good advice as you can get.
Okay, like you personally, what would be like a go-to, if, like a good dynamic, a good ribbon, a good condenser?
I mean, I feel like you can't go wrong. Like, if you're recording guitars, if you get an SM57, that'll go a long way. Yeah. Plug that into a decent mic pre, and you can talk for days about mic pre's. But, like a vocal mic, like, I don't know, Lewitt actually is making really good microphones. They have tube and solid state mics that they go a long way, and they're pretty inexpensive.
Right, yeah. And that company that used to be a part of SE Electronics now they're out of the UK, and they're distributing these really affordable mics called Aston.
Yeah, I've seen you guys have those here.
Yeah, I mean, they blew me away. I'm naturally skeptical about stuff, if it sounds too good to be true. But like the Aston Origin is the simplest, cheapest one least expensive one. Right. It's just cardioid, but man, it's just clear and open and very undistorted. That's a really important thing. And I think that's a real hazard when you're choosing cheaper stuff. Oftentimes, like, if it has some flashy element about it, like, maybe it's speakers and they're cheap and they're hyped sounding, those are not going to help you make a good mix. And if the mic is hyped sounding, it's actually got stuff that once it builds up over a lot of tracks, it's not going to be good. Well, the Aston, for example, doesn't have that hash that's going to build up in a bad way over your tracks, and that 57 is going to keep on giving. You mentioned a preamp. A 57 will sound totally different in like a cheap interface or a cheap mixer than it will in like a good, maybe $500 or $1,000 preamp. Huge difference.
Well, and we got the 500 series fad going on, so it's like that's where people go wrong as well. It's like you can spend a lot of money on something that you don't like. Yeah. Or that isn't as good as you thought, or doesn't sound like what you thought. But I mean, like BAE makes great mic pre's, and Avitas, who designed a lot of stuff for BAE.
Yeah, so made right here in LA.
Those are like really good go-to mic preamps that can last you a lifetime. Like, you wouldn't have to replace a 312 or an MA5 mic pre. Those you'll just want 10 of them.
Exactly.
You know?
No, I'm glad you brought that up. It lasts you a lifetime, because I think it's really tempting to say, I'm just starting out and I just need something to get going. Well, try to at least pick something that will last you a lifetime, because it will cost you more in the end to buy something that just gets you by.
Yeah.
I'd rather you wait 2 more months, a couple more paychecks, whatever it is. Your birthday comes around, you ask for cash instead of birthday presents or whatever.
Yeah.
And you get that thing that's like I have a bunch of products in my head that I think of as like on the threshold of worth buying.
Yeah.
They're super affordable, but you can keep it for life. I just, there's this word serious. Like, are you serious? Are you serious about your art? And I don't want that word to seem like, are you, not fun, or I just means like, are you going to invest in yourself? Because that's what it's really about. And there can be a monetary cost to investing in yourself, but that's what life is about. And I love it when people see the long game that they're going to play, and like, you know what, I'm worth investing in something that's going to last me my career, or going to get me started on my first 5 years of my career, and it will help me like realize my own artistic vision. And I love it when people at least start there. And that's what we try to do at Vintage King.
Yeah, if you can get through to people and that kind of like springs a light bulb in their mind, and they kind of get what you're talking about, they can resonate with that, because people want to buy just like the coolest looking thing or whatever, and it's like, if you have a good mic pre, you don't necessarily need to go and buy a tube mic pre now. Maybe you're at the point where you need a better converter. You're doing stuff where you don't really need more mic preamps, right? So that's what I see people get. They get on this kind of like tumbling motion, especially in the 500 series stuff, where it's like you just keep wanting to buy them, and it's like trading cards, you buy and sell and this and that, and it's like, it can get real dangerous.
Okay, so back to this question. What do you think are just the essential building blocks of gear for someone starting out? What do they have to have?
Well, you need like some sort of interface, like Focusrite, Presonus, or Universal Audio. They make these really, if you're in a budget, most people are on a budget.
Yeah.
And then they'll expand. So get something decent like that.
Right.
And then, get a good microphone, and then maybe a preamp that can interface into that if you can afford to get one, or else use the preamps built in.
Right.
And then, a good set of speakers that are true. I mean, speakers is the hardest thing.
Yeah.
Because it's hard, because when you hear, and it sounds good, you have to listen to material that you're very familiar with, so that if it's hyping things.
Right.
Because it's easy to like have a sweetened speaker and you're like, that sounds amazing, but it's like, is it really accurate? Am I going to be able to, hear if there's a problem in the mid-range if I'm mixing, or is it just kind of masking because the low end is being kind of hyped?
Yeah, it's easy to, and especially in a showroom, it's easy to fall in love with something that sounds more hyped, but you really want to pick the thing that's the most honest to you. It's like a good relationship, Tell me, what's really there, so I can improve it. And as you're mixing, you want to know what it actually sounds like in the real world.
So, I mean, back when I learned about recording, it was all about your signal flow. It's like if you had a crappy mic cable in the chain, it doesn't matter if you got an LA2A or a Fairchild and a U47 in your chain. Your signal is garbage if your mic cable isn't good. So from the source being, if it's a guitar amp or whatever, you're going to have a decent sound there, decent mic, all the way to your speaker. You want to have at least a comparable signal from, in to out. And I think that's where to start, right? You don't want any chinks in the chain there.
No chinks in chains.
And that's hard for people to understand. It's like people are like, oh, I don't want to spend $50 to $100 on a mic cable. Well, learn how to build one, because you need a really good mic cable.
That's good advice too. And I think it can be important to understand a little bit about what's under the hood and just some basic stuff. And I think having to build your own mic cable is actually really good counsel.
Well, because I've had those problems where you got noise and you change the cable. You're like, that was the problem. People right away go to like, oh, it's the mic pre or the mic, and it's like, well, did you change the cable? And sometimes that's the problem,
right.
So you got to just make sure, you got to know your setup, and spend a decent amount of budget on that, then build from there.
Well, one thing that came up when Lisamarie and I were talking was this idea of getting to 10,000 hours. And what does that do for someone? And I started that conversation a bit by talking about, I think it's important to become an expert at something. And there's plenty of failing that happens along the way. There's plenty of times when you're like, why does my signal sound like it's like paper thin? And then, you or I would know, it's probably like one of there's probably like one of the 100 strands of the mic cable is left as connected, under the jack under the sleeve of the XLR. So we would know to check that. But I think that I love that now so many people are encouraged to just explore on their own, and the fact that we have these tools available for people to do it in their own space, record their friends. I mean, God, what's more valuable than just like building up those hours, making those mistakes, and hearing what works, and then
I think sometimes people are afraid to kind of make mistakes, so they don't want to make a leap and try something, or they're nervous. But I mean, I'm so thankful for all the mistakes I've made, because I learn more from mistakes. I don't learn from doing things right. It's like I'll see other people make a mistake, or I'll make a mistake, and I just never do it again. It's like in my head, I don't want to do that. And that goes with like, you don't want to build a house of cards. You want a solid foundation, and so as long as you understand signal flow and recording and what sound is, you can kind of make intuitive decisions on purchasing gear. I mean, you got to trust yourself, because a lot of people, they want someone else to tell them, but it's like, really, you got to be able to know for yourself, is this right? And so it's trial and error. You got to make a lot of mistakes so you understand why that something happened.
What that goes back to is listening. And you had talked about if you're going to choose monitors, play material that you love and that you know really well, so that you can understand like, how does something that I know is a great mix, that sounds great in my car, sounds great in my earbuds, sounds great on my friend's stereo, sounds great on my home stereo, everywhere. Take that and start training your ears. Train your ears to know what good sound is. I think, and still to this day, I will have some of my favorite mixes up, playing on repeat while I'm mixing something, so I can go back to it and go like, oh yeah, okay, I'm too bass heavy, or I'm, be a student always. I mean, you talk to the biggest, most successful heroes of yours, whether that's an instrumentalist or writer or engineer, and they are by and large still students, and they will tell you that they're constantly open to learning. Yeah. And so you're making these videos and you're helping teach people, and we have so much more access to information and education. It's great to be open to trying new things and challenge yourself. I love being influenced by other people, especially when they have an opposite approach of mine. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes I'll like pick up some tricks. You ever you sit on a session, you're like, oh, whoa. What?
Well, no, sometimes you have clients that kind of like, they push, and sometimes they don't know how to ask for what they want, but they explain it, and then you try it, and then you come up with new things, and you're like, wow, that actually was kind of a cool technique that kind of adds to your thing, Yeah. So it's cool. Well, thanks for having us here, man. I mean, I was going to ask you, so you ever come in here, every day, and you're just like, I just want to mess with this piece of gear or that, and you just get to spend 20, 30 minutes trying to figure out, like, what does this Buzz audio compressor do, or how's it sound?
Man, all the time. I'll come in here and I'll load up a track that I know really well, or I'll bring in a mix that I'm working on, and I get to try, 18 different stereo compressors or master bus processors on stuff, or I get to like play with all these mono compressors and hear how they react to different vocals. And one day I'll fall in love with one thing, and another day I'll fall in love with something else. I mean, I definitely have my favorites. I love it too when here we are in LA, and there's a lot of equipment that gets designed and built here in LA, like Overstayer. They're doing great stuff, and I fell in love with the stereo voltage control. That's a go-to of mine on stereo bus, and it's cool when you can develop relationships with these folks who are like us. They're independent. We call them boutique manufacturers, because they're really just guys and women with a passion for something like we have, and they're obsessed about the gear just as obsessed as we are about engineering and music and production. And so yeah, I like supporting those folks and giving them a shout out because they make life more interesting.
No, I mean, and they listen, you know, like if you, that's what I like, you know, having a relationship with a manufacturer or equipment designer is like, you get feedback of, you know, real world use of their gear, because sometimes they spend a lot of their time designing stuff and they have to, you know, deal with orders and stuff like that. They don't get to be in the studio all the time, you know? And so people that use it, they get to hear things. Or if, you know, like I'm good friends with Steve Furlot, and, you know, I remember I think the TSL3 version of this, it was completely variable. And we're like, it'd be cool if you had detented knobs so we can recall this.
Yeah.
And so he did it, and then eventually a new version came out and he had it and put like high pass filters in it. So these people, they listen and they want to take it to the next level.
That's great.
You know, and people like overstay. I mean, they're adding features that just like that you would only see in a plug-in. And so to put it in an analog piece of gear is amazing, because, you know, like as much as I love Fairchild and LA Two-Ways, I mean, there's a lot more modern gear that just puts that stuff to shame when it comes to functionality and just dialing in an exact sound that you're looking for, rather than kind of settling like, oh, this is an in-between where I want, but it's cool, you know? Not to say anything bad about those, but,
and
you know.
And like we were, Lisamarie and I touched on that, you know, debating whether, you know, analog is good or digital is bad, or, you know, that they're all tools, you know, and you know, if you were given, you know, XYZ, you could make a great record out of it, and that's because you've trained your ears, you listen really well, and you're going to make, you know, musical decisions that bring the most emotion out of the music, and that's why there's such a cornucopia of stuff to choose from here, because these are the paints for our palette, and everybody's got a different idea of what their art is. And I'm psyched that you wanted to come down to Vintage King in Los Angeles to shoot this interview and take a tour of Vintage King LA. And
I mean, any excuse I can have to come check out gear, I just love. I mean, I'm a geek of gear. I don't really play instruments, so my instruments are all these knobs.
These are absolutely
you know?
instruments. Yeah, these are the musicians in our orchestra, and as the engineer, we get to conduct them. It's an honor, because really there is, as you were saying, there's an individual behind Inward Connections. Steve Furlot, you know, he's the first cellist, you know, and Jeff over at Overstayer, you know, he's second fiddle? No, he's the first violinist.
Well, they have their own
conducting an
ear.
orchestra of these brilliant people.
Yeah, I mean, these guys have their own ideas about what they think gear should sound like, what transformers to use, and they're influenced by different other pieces of equipment. So it's cool that they can kind of just be creative and create gear that we can be creative using.
Absolutely, man.
So yeah. I'll come down here every single day, like I said.
Okay, you're invited anytime, Greg.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Thanks for watching Inside the Studio with Greg Wurth. We're here with Alex Oana at VKLA, and I'll check you out next time.